The night Delilah Thornfield tried to have Christmas arrested, she came stomping down our street in knee-high boots, waving cease and desist letters like she was serving warrants from the North Pole. She was red in the face, frost puffing out of her mouth, screaming that anyone who attended our neighborhood Christmas party would be fined, prosecuted, maybe even hauled off in cuffs. And the craziest part wasn't that she believed it. It was that for 6 straight months she'd been filing formal complaints to City Hall about our street, without realizing the man reading every one of them lived 3 houses down from her. My name's Ethan Wellington. Most folks in Oak Ridge Estates knew me as the quiet guy with the wife who made killer chili, the twin girls who covered the sidewalk in chalk, and the habit of mowing his lawn just before sunset. What they didn't know was that I was also the mayor of Maplewood Heights. I kept that part quiet on purpose. After years in public office, I wanted a neighborhood where my daughters could just be kids and my wife and I could feel normal for once. No handshakes, no speeches, no politics, just backyard cookouts, carpool chatter, and that little rhythm of suburban life that feels harmless until one unstable person decides they own it. That person was Delilah. You know the type. Crisp haircut, sharper voice, clipboard, always tucked under one arm like a weapon. She ran the HOA. The way prison wardens run cell blocks with rules, fear, and the kind of fake professionalism that makes ordinary people doubt themselves. At first it was petty stuff. Basketball hoops were suddenly visual clutter. Kids' chalk drawings became surface defacement. A garden gnome was labeled an unauthorized lawn figure. People laughed at first because what else do you do when a grown woman leaves a written warning about a ceramic frog in somebody's flower bed? Then the fine started. 200 here, 300 there, threats of liens, threats of hearings, threats of consequences nobody fully understood. The Rodriguez family got cited because their American flag brushed a tree limb. Mrs. Nakamura got a notice for non-conforming landscaping, which turned out to mean flowers Delilah thought looked too foreign. Mrs. Patterson, a 73-year-old widow who still set out cookies for every delivery driver in December, got written up for an oversized wreath. Kids stopped playing outside as much. People started pulling decorations down before sunset. You could actually feel the street changing, like somebody had turned down the volume on the neighborhood. And then she went after the Christmas party. For 15 years, Joe and Linda Kowalski had hosted the neighborhood Christmas gathering on December 23rd. It wasn't fancy. A few strings of lights in the yard, folding tables with cookies and casseroles, kids singing off-key carols, old men arguing about extension cords, somebody always burning the first batch of cider. It was messy and warm and human, which I think is exactly why Delilah hated it. Traditions like that remind people they belong to each other, not to a rule book. 3 nights before the party, 47 families packed into Joe's garage. It smelled like sawdust, motor oil, old cardboard, and fear. People were passing around Delilah's letters with shaking hands. One young mom said Delilah had threatened to call child services because toys left in the yard created hazardous visual disorder. Tom Rodriguez, a Vietnam vet with the posture of a man who'd survived worse than this, held up a citation and said deadpan. Apparently, patriotism is now out of compliance. A few people laughed. Then one woman started crying. That was the moment it stopped being ridiculous and started feeling rotten. See, bullies like Delilah always pretend it's about standards, but it's never really about standards. It's about isolation. If she could make every family feel alone, embarrassed, scared to speak up, then she got to rule. That's how little tyrannies work. One doorstep at a time. What she didn't know was that every complaint she filed to the city landed on my desk. For months she'd been building a paper trail of harassment with my office stamped on the top of it. She kept asking the mayor to investigate Maple Street crackdown on undesirable gatherings, stop criminal neighborhood organizing, and every time the mayor was sitting at his kitchen table reading her nonsense beside a cup of coffee. So while Ethan the neighbor listened, Ethan the mayor started digging. Let me back up a sec. Years before I got elected, I worked in city planning and municipal law. That teaches you one useful thing real quick. Most people who hide behind official-sounding paperwork assume nobody will ever check whether the paperwork means anything. So I checked. State corporate filings, renewal records, business registrations, enforcement authority. And there it was, plain as day. The Oak Ridge Estates HOA hadn't maintained valid incorporation status in over 2 years. which meant every fine Delilah had issued, every threat, every notice, every little citation printed on fancy letterhead. Legally speaking, it was theater. Expensive theater, cruel theater, but theater. I didn't say a word yet. Instead, I filed an anonymous complaint with the state attorney general's office, then quietly made sure neighbors started getting copies of public information about HOA licensing requirements. No preaching, no fingerprints, just facts. By Tuesday morning, the whole block was buzzing. By noon, Delilah had received notice of a state inquiry, and the look on her face through my kitchen window was one I'll admit I enjoyed more than a decent person probably should. That should have scared her straight. It didn't. It made her meaner. She held an emergency board meeting. She demanded a $300 special assessment from every household to fund her legal defense. She installed cameras aimed right at the Kowalski's house. Then she escalated into something uglier. Communal streetlights went out, mailbox access got mysteriously locked down, and elderly residents were suddenly trudging to the post office to get medication because neighborhood mail had become collateral damage in Delilah's war on Christmas cookies. That was when a second layer of the story cracked open. I started comparing HOA billing records with municipal service agreements. Snow removal, street maintenance, lighting, trash coordination. Delilah had been charging residents for services the city already provided under standard tax-funded coverage. Month after month, year after year, people had been paying twice. It wasn't just harassment anymore. It was theft. Channel 7 got an anonymous tip. Public records started moving. Neighbors started keeping folders. Mrs. Patterson turned her living room into a research bunker with banker's boxes and a yellow legal pad. Tom Rodriguez organized witnesses like he was prepping a field operation. Our little frightened block started acting like a community again, and once that happened, Delilah began to lose her grip. Then came the twist none of us saw coming. Late Saturday night, Mrs. Patterson called me with that quiet voice people get when they found something bad enough to change the air in a room. Her late husband had kept every scrap of neighborhood paperwork since the 80s, and buried in those records was the original HOA charter. Plus bank documents Delilah clearly never expected anyone to see. I drove over right away. The charter proved she'd been acting without board approval for years. She had no authority to issue unilateral fines, no authority to raise fees, no authority to do half the things she'd been terrorizing people over. But the bank papers, that was the part that made my stomach drop. Delilah had secretly leveraged common neighborhood property, the playground, clubhouse, green space, all of it to secure debt for her legal campaign. She wasn't just trying to cancel a party. She was burning through the neighborhood's future and setting up the common areas to be swallowed when the money ran out. That's when I understood something I wish people learned earlier in life. Sometimes the person screaming loudest about order is the one stealing the foundation out from under everybody else. By Monday, this thing had outgrown petty suburban drama. We were looking at fraud, false reporting, misuse of municipal systems, possible mail fraud, possible bribery. Then Delilah made it easy. She offered one of my building inspectors cash to invent code violations on the Kowalski house. He recorded the whole thing. After that, it was just a matter of timing. And timing, believe me, matters. I could have exposed her quietly. I could have ended it with a closed-door meeting, a resignation letter, a lawyerly statement full of bland words like concerns and irregularities. But that would have let her leave with dignity she hadn't earned, while the families she'd tormented were left holding the memory of fear. No, this needed daylight. So we let the party happen. December 23rd arrived hard and bright, the kind of winter day where every sound feels sharper. By afternoon, the Kowalski's backyard was glowing warm white lights in the bare branches, tables filling with casseroles and cookies, kids bundled in puffy coats running underfoot, the smell of cinnamon pine and hot chocolate floating over the fence lines. Channel 7 was there. Police were nearby. A few federal agents very quietly were in position. Delilah, meanwhile, had set up a folding table at the neighborhood entrance like some deranged border checkpoint trying to stop guests with a clipboard and homemade signs about criminal activity. She really thought she was winning. At one point, she called my office triumphant as a game show winner and said, "The federal agents I requested are finally here." I almost laughed into the receiver. By 3:30, she was melting down in public. She blocked Mrs. Patterson carrying sugar cookies. She screamed at Tom Rodriguez in front of his grandkids. She accused the Palmer family of bringing inappropriate cultural decorations. Then she did the one thing that turned the whole crowd cold. She pointed at my daughters Emma and Grace walking in with Sarah and demanded officers arrest them because their father was the criminal mastermind behind the conspiracy. That was it. At 4 o'clock, with the sky going gold behind the lights and children starting up Silent Night near the hot chocolate table, I stepped out of the crowd and walked toward her. She was still clutching that megaphone, still shaking with the kind of rage that makes a person look hollowed out from the inside. "I demand the mayor come here right now," she yelled. "I want these criminals arrested." I stopped about 15 feet away and said, "Plain as could be, ma'am. I'm Ethan Wellington, and I'm exactly who you want to speak to." She blinked at me, annoyed, confused. I said, "The mayor." "I am the mayor." You could feel the whole yard go silent. No wind, no chatter. Just one long, suspended second where every person there watched her face try to catch up to reality. First disbelief, then recognition, then the kind of horror that strips all the fight out of somebody at once. I showed her my ID. Then I told her what she'd actually spent 6 months doing, filing false complaints to my office, threatening residents without authority, using invalid HOA enforcement, submitting fraudulent reports, attempting to bribe city employees, targeting families, documenting her own abuse in writing, while demanding I prosecute the people she victimized. Behind me, City Attorney Rebecca Martinez stepped forward with dissolution papers. Then the agents moved in. The handcuffs clicked on under Christmas lights while children sang in the background, and I swear to you, if somebody had written that scene into a movie script, people would have said it was too on the nose. But life gets away with things fiction can't. Delilah kept muttering, "I have authority. I have connections. I control this neighborhood." And I leaned in just enough for her to hear me over the carols and said, "Real authority protects people. What you had was bullying with stationery." Then they led her away. And that yard exploded. Not because people were celebrating somebody's downfall, not really. It was relief. It was 6 months of clenched shoulders finally dropping. It was kids laughing again. It was old neighbors hugging in winter coats. It was the sound of a community remembering itself. The party went on for hours after that. That's the part I think about most now, not the arrest, not the cameras, not even the look on Delilah's face when she realized who I was. I think about Mrs. Patterson sitting by the cider with tears in her eyes because she could finally hang her wreath without fear. I think about Tom Rodriguez standing with one hand on his grandson's shoulder watching kids run across the yard like the street belonged to them again. I think about my girls asking if Christmas was safe now, and me being able to say, "Yeah, baby, it is." People like to believe power shows up with sirens and speeches. Sometimes it does. But sometimes real power is quieter than that. Sometimes it's neighbors keeping records, a widow opening old boxes, a city worker hitting record, a whole street deciding fear has overstayed its welcome. And one bitter truth I learned all over again through that mess is this: evil doesn't always arrive looking monstrous. Sometimes it shows up laminated, well-dressed, and full of rules. Sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who confuse control with virtue and think paperwork can replace decency. Delilah pled out in the end. Restitution probation assets sold the whole slow collapse of a woman who thought fear made her important. The HOA was dissolved. A new community association formed, voluntary, transparent, democratic. The Christmas party became an official city-supported event the next year, bigger than ever. Kids sang louder. Decorations stayed up longer. Nobody asked permission to be human. And every December when the lights go on and the first tray of cookies hits the table, somebody always glances toward Delilah's old house and smiles, that little smile people get when karma has done its job better than revenge ever could. So here's the question. When someone abuses a little bit of power for long enough, do they deserve a quiet exit, or do they deserve to be exposed in front of everyone they tried to intimidate? And tell me honestly, if you'd been in that neighborhood, would you have fought back early, or would you have kept your head down until she came for your family too? Drop your take in the comments, and if you've ever dealt with a bully hiding behind rules, titles, or fake authority, share your story too.